This video is going to go over how to gesso a canvas, whether you're airbrushing or whether you're doing other art on it, and talk about a little bit whether you'd even need to gesso a canvas. Do you have to gesso your canvases before you airbrush on them? Well, no, you don't absolutely have to. If you have a pre-primed and pre-gessoed canvas, no, you do not. However, there are some reasons in which you may want to for the ultimate in smooth surface, even if you're using better canvases. Most likely, if you're just learning about art and just getting into it, most likely you're not purchasing the best canvases in the first place. Let's pop a before and after of gessoed canvas, and we will also pop up a few images of pictures that were not gessoed, and you can see where you may run into problems when airbrushing on a not so smooth surface. This is an 18 by 24 canvas. You're looking in normal use. That's pretty decent. This is another 18 by 24, but if you zoom in really tight, you can see how overspray will start to collect in the little divots in there. That's another 12 by 16 that displays well, but this is a 12 by 16 with a gloss varnish, and you can see how in certain lighting it can cause a glare. All of those paintings are from my budget paintings that I do for pet portraiture, and I can do 15, 20 of them a month. Really don't have time to gesso all that many canvases. But if you're looking to get the absolute smoothest finish, or if you want to do scratching and erasing techniques like in this picture here, then you're looking to achieve photorealism or the best detail possible, then you're going to want a much smoother surface than a canvas will give you. Of course, once again, that's going to be dependent upon size and techniques you plan to use. So I got a 24 by 36 that I'm doing for a charity giveaway, and it is a significant painting. So I'm going to go through the process. Let's get busy. I dampen my canvas with water, and then I get myself some acrylic gesso, which is what you're going to need, and a couple of plastic spreaders. I used to spray, and I used to, get I've tried rollers and everything else, but unless I'm doing a lot of canvases, it just makes a lot more mess for me to deal with. So I usually pick just one spreader that will actually fit inside my gesso tub, and then get a wider spreader and start spreading it out. It's important when I do this first layer, I do it really thin, but it's important to come around the edges and really push that down into the weave. I like my gesso to be a little bit on the thinner side, which is why I wet my canvas first. Again, damp, not soaking wet, and then start pulling off the excess gesso from my canvas. Because this is a larger canvas and it bounces around, that is why you see me make sure I push it into the edges, because the canvas will be flexible, when it's that size. And then once I have come across it in one direction, then I will come back and I will run perpendicular to the original direction, making sure that I smooth out any big lumps that get on the side of the canvas. The flatter your knife is, the more gesso you're going to leave behind. Also, depending on how much pressure you lay in there, I like to pull it pretty tight, especially on the first layer, and get that smoothed out very well, just skimming off the top of the. You will want to clean your taping knives off, and you do not in any way, shape, or form want any little gritty, bumpy pieces of dried gesso getting in there when you put in your next layers. Same thing, make sure you clean the lid of that tub off. Trust me, if you do this, you will thank me. If you don't, you will remember this. After I've let the gesso dry just a little bit before it's completely set up, if I remember, I get back to it and see how there's some little raised edges. They're very easy to take out while the gesso is still a little bit wet, and before I do my next layers. If you do not get to it before it dries, no big deal. You just may need to sand them down before you put your next layer of gesso on there. So now would be a great time to go argue with your spouse or something like that, because you got about an hour and a half to kill, in which case you can listen to them explain their side. And it's going to take about an hour and a half before this flashes off, which once it is no longer shiny and wet, then you know you can go ahead and put your next layer on. You're going to repeat that process 2 to 3 more times. You can go as many as 5 or 6 layers, depending on how rough the canvas is you start with, how smooth the canvas is, and what your expectations for the absolute perfect smoothness. Of course, you may take more layers than if you just want to get a pretty smooth surface. Then once you get all of your layers on, you're going to want to wait Overnight is generally what I do. Just leave it set till the next day before I come back to do the final finishing, which we'll go into now. After everything is ready, then I will start sanding down the big spots. I start with the edges since I do not gesso the edge of my canvas. I usually use 320 grit sandpaper, and I will catch that edge. It is a pet peeve of mine to see very sloppy edges, and you'll see it all the time. Then I will hit any of the larger raised edges. Once I have done that, you can do this with a sanding sponge. 220 grit sanding sponge works great, but what I found is a drywall sanding sponge has been the best thing for me, leaving almost no mess. So I will wet down the canvas just a little bit the next day after the gesso is dried, and then I will sand it with the sanding sponge for drywall. That's what it's made for, is for sanding drywall, getting smooth drywall. Gesso's not that much different, just a little bit more plasticky. And I find this gives me a really, really solid and great surface, leaving almost no sand scratches whatsoever in the finish. And then once I have sanded it with the sanding side, of course, I take the sponge side and I wipe it all down, and leaving me with a completely dust-free and clean surface. And then I will let it dry, usually for 2 days before I will paint on them. This is the way that I found has kept the mess down as much as possible. I don't want to overcomplicate things. You shouldn't overcomplicate things. It's really not that difficult of a process. Hope you got something out of this video. I am Bill Kennedy with the Airspace. Y'all have a great day. We'll catch you later. Bye.